Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. For those of you who've attended our webinars before, this is the last one in the series that we'll be doing about IDV, as IDV goes live on the 18th of November. But we do have other ones scheduled. There's another one scheduled towards the end of the year, and we'll be sending out more details on that nearer the time. For those of you, if this is your first webinar with us, we'll be talking about IDV, how to conduct IDV, what it means to be an ACSP as well. Now, I was hoping to tell you that I was being joined by Companies House today, but unfortunately they've not logged on at this point. I contacted them yesterday to confirm their attendance and I haven't had a reply. Oh, as we speak, the devil appears.
I was panicking then, Liz. I didn't have a link in my calendar invite. I thought, oh.
Well, it's very nice to have you here, Mark, and I wasn't saying anything bad about Companies House at all. So we're delighted to have you.
You sent me a load of emails yesterday while I was traveling, so I managed to find the link. So
good. I'm very pleased to have you here. So if we just rewind slightly, very pleased to be joined by Mark Buckley today from Companies House. I think you're the senior lead implementation for ACSPs, is that correct? Okay, and I think Mark's on tour at the moment speaking to various different people, and so very pleased for him sparing the time to talk to us today. Now, unfortunately, please bear with us. Just bear with me a second. Mark, apparently you're really quiet. Is there any way that you can turn up your volume? Yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, much better. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, my mic was under my arm.
Unfortunately, Mark and I haven't had an opportunity just to sort out who's doing what when. Did you have some slides that you wanted to share with us, Mark?
I do. I can do. I can try anyway.
Okay. Well, would you like to go first, and then I'll pick up on any bits afterwards? You should have the option to share your screen down at the bottom.
This works very different. There you go.
There we go.
Guys.
Lovely. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. I won't present in full present mode because I know GoTo doesn't like me sharing my stuff. I'm in full present mode, so as long as everybody can share the see the screens,
yeah.
I'll talk to the screens. It shouldn't take long, 10-15 minutes maybe, and then there'll be time for sort of people to sort of ask questions and sort of anything ACSP ID related or any other questions that you might want to ask. I may not be able to answer everything because I know lots about a lot of things, but not everything about everything. But if the questions I can't answer, I'll go away and I'll find you a response.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
So essentially, who are we? I won't sort of patronize everybody on this call by sort of going in and explaining who Companies House are. But I think this is just a sort of a screen that allows me to talk about the need, why Companies House needed to change, and why the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act was required. I think it's no secret that the way that the registrar and the law was set up, the registrar had very, very limited, if hardly any powers to sort of query or question or prevent potentially suspicious information, either getting onto the register or even removing information from the register very, very easily. ECCTA has kind of reversed that, so the registrar has querying powers. There's a lot more powers now to sort of manage and sort of maintain the register. And I also have to apologise. I'm saying she, and we got a new registrar about, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, who's a he. So I'll be interoperable through this because I've had like 9 years of saying she as a registrar, but actually we now got a male one, so I apologise in advance. So as I said, the Act gives the registrar a lot more powers to sort of make the register a far more trusted space, and these measures are being introduced over quite a long period of time. So we started the initial measures back in sort of March 2024, and we'll be introducing measures up until probably the end of 26, early 2027, potentially, to incorporate the full suite of economic crime and corporate transparency powers. Hopefully, once all these measures are in as a package, they'll sort of improve transparency, more trust in the register, and also drive sort of confidence in the UK economy as a result. And as I say, the things that we have implemented already are starting to make a difference. Things like rejecting incorporations with fraud markers, removing information from the register, lots and lots of things now where we use now new powers where we weren't able to do so previously. So, as I say, we introduced a lot of changes from March 2024, but I suppose the big measures in terms of ECCTA, or particularly the ones that are going to cause the most work for everybody, are identity verification, i.e. no one who's on the register, and also sort of the registration of authorised corporate service providers, ACSPs. So we launched ACSPs on the 18th of March, and then we allowed everybody to access our identity verification sort of processes. That's either through one login or via ACSPs via the portal, and from the 8th of April this year. We didn't launch them together because they are huge services in their own right, and we wanted to make sure that ACSPs worked with the identity verification elements in it before then opening up ID to everybody else. Now the next sort of big thing off the production line, I suppose, from an ECCTA perspective particularly, is the mandation of identity requirements on the public register. So that from the 18th of November this year, any new company incorporated, any new director, LLP member, or PSE being appointed to a company on or after the 18th of November will need to have undertaken identity verification and provide the personal code credentials for the registrar. Any existing company will need to provide their ID credentials mainly around the anniversary of the confirmation statement. There's a slight nuance for people with significant control, and I'll talk about that a little later. So I've talked about ACSP registration 18th of March and ID on the 8th of April, and obviously mandation of IDs on the public register from the 18th of November. We've got about 6.5 million unique identities, 7 million sort of transactions overall with people with multiple directorships and PSEs and things. So we are ingesting that data over what we call a transition period between November 25 and December 2026. It's still an enormous amount of work. It works out around about 500,000, 600,000 transactions a month over the next year. And at the moment, the next thing, as well as knowing who's on the register with identity verification, the next big thing that we are looking to introduce sometime in 2026 will be the requirement for anybody putting information onto the register, either to provide their identity verification credentials, so that's if a director or PSE is filing on behalf of their own company, or an ACSP credentials if they're filing on behalf of a third-party company. So ACSPs, well, it's a big fancy term really for a third-party presenter. The difference with an ACSP is that they have to be supervised for anti-money laundering in the UK, and once they are supervised for AML in the UK, they can then make an application to the registrar. We will check their registration against data that we hold of supervisory bodies. So we hold, I think, most of the big data sets for the likes of ICAW, ACCA. We also have access to other data sets as well, or we contact the supervisory bodies to validate applications in every instance. As of last week, when I updated this, we've registered 11,000 ACSPs. As of this morning, it was over 12,000. So we've registered over 12,000 ACSPs, and I'll explain a bit on the next page. But the reject rate is quite high for authorized corporate service provider applications, where ACSPs are getting certain data incorrect. At the moment, you only need to be an ACSP if you want to identity verify clients. So that's the only thing that ACSPs can do on the register yet. When we mandate present the requirements next year, then you will have to be an ACSP in order to file information for your client. But at the moment, it's an optional thing if you want to do the identity verification for your client, or even register early and sort of get your ACSP credentials all set up in readiness for when we mandate. Then that's fine too. But the only transactional thing that you can do as an ACSP at the moment is to identity verify clients and provide that information to the registrar through the ID portal. And there's loads and loads of guidance to support ACSPs through this, particularly because ACSPs need to verify individuals to the same standard as sort of our one login service. The difference between an ACSP's toolbox and the one login service, the one login service is quite limited in the sort of types of information that it will validate, whereas ACSPs have a much larger toolbox available to them to get their clients to our standard. So if you haven't registered as an ACSP yet, basically you need a relevant person, such as a director or a sole trader. If you're either a sole trader, i.e. not a limited company, or you are supervised as an individual and not a firm, you need to sort of ID as part of the application process. As well as your supervised firm details, we'll ask for your AML supervisory body membership number. Now this is important because I think we've rejected at the moment about 33% of all applications, and about 95% of applications rejected are because people are getting that membership number incorrect. Various reasons, obviously 26 different supervisory bodies, they all use different numbers. Some of them use 2 different numbers, one for a firm, one for an individual, so there are reasons for that. But if you're unsure, contact your supervisory body and they'll be able to let you know which number you should be using. Also, if you're a sole trader or an individual who is supervised, you need to provide slightly different information, such as name, date of birth, because obviously Companies House doesn't hold that information about you. But if you're a limited company and you register company name, company number, authentication code, we've authenticated it to you and we will pull your data across from our record for you to be able to accept. Once you're registered, you'll get a digital account and a unique identity number, and then obviously once you've got that account, your firm can sort of then transact with the registrar on identity credentials. The unique thing about this account that we developed specifically for ACSPs is that you can now add colleagues to that account. So instead of sharing an account and a passcode and things like that, if your employees are set up a one login account, they can then bind that account to your ACSP account, so that if your employee is transacting with a registrar, we know it's come from you, and we also know the individual within your organization who submitted that documentation. So if there's any fraud or any issues with any of your employees, we'll be able to identify that and then work with you to resolve that issue. I've talked about rejections. As I say, AML number not matching supervisor data, or not being able to find you within the supervisory body data set. That is by far the biggest reason for rejection. And it is set up like that because we're we are trying to minimise the amount of false registrations that we get. A, because we don't want people who aren't AML supervised in our system, and B, because I think once somebody is in our system or isn't registered and they start to sort of transact, we've then got quite a lot of work then to clear that up after them. So the whole system was set up to try to identify that people were AML supervised at the point of application, and by ingesting data, we've tried to speed that process up so that you guys aren't waiting for weeks or many days before an application is actually agreed and processed. So identity verification, as I say, we've got over 6.5 million unique individuals to ID by the end of the transition period. And we started on the 8th of April to give a big voluntary period where people are identity verifying. As of last week, we'd registered nearly 750,000 identities. So it's probably more than that because I haven't checked this part to register this morning. But there's lots of guidance on the identity verification process, and I put some links in the presentation which I can get shared with you. The key thing I should point out is that Companies House identity verification is a standalone standard. So whilst you may be doing ID checks as part of Know Your Customer, the KYC checks under AML are risk-based checks. So make sure that if you are undertaking identity verification and providing that to the registrar, that the information that you are checking and the information that, particularly around the 12-month residency check, which is unique to our standard, all of those elements are being met, because, as I say, the risk when we sort of dip sample or we find anything inconsistent with identities that you've done in not meeting our standard, ultimately the risk could be that we would suspend or ultimately cease your organisation from being an ACSP. But before we got anywhere near that, we would enter into a dialogue with you to sort of work out, what the issues were, help you to fix those, and then sort of be more collaborative in trying to get you to the standard, because we're very much aware that this is very much new to us and it's very, very new to you guys as well. So read our guidance. We aren't able to give you advice on how you set up your identity processes and things like that, because we aren't ID professionals ourselves, but the standard is there, and there are lots and lots of identity professionals in the space that would be able to help you out with this. So that's kind of it for the presentation. As I said, I try not to take too long in doing this bit, because I know lots of people want to ask questions. But if you want to keep up to date with Companies House, obviously our campaign site, blogs, and sort of webinars, things that I'm doing like this. We've got lots of social media channels, or you can subscribe to newsletters. So any new changes or updates in terms of ECCTA deliverables, you'll generally find it on the campaign site or through one of these methods. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate that. I should have said at the beginning, if anybody does want to ask any questions, there's a question chat button at the top right. So if you'd like to put any of your questions in there, I know a few of you already have. There's a few people asking if we're going to share the slides. So I'm more than happy to share the slides afterwards as well. And I've answered a few of those questions as Mark has been talking as well. I've got a few bits of information to give you, and I've got some slides to fill in a bit of the detail about some processes as well, and then we'll go to questions afterwards. I was very lucky to be at Companies House Stakeholder Conference yesterday, so I found out a few bits of information. Mark's touched on some of those as well. One of the key things that I took were that there's over 700,000 people already completed IDV on a voluntary basis, so I think that's fantastic. That's a big chunk of people that have done it before it's required, and that will help a lot of you, I know, with processing and the burden of chasing up people's codes, etc. Another thing that was mentioned yesterday is that Companies House are very aware that there can be some complications, especially with people with disabilities, where perhaps they can't complete the check online on Companies House website, and then the alternative is to go to the post office, where that's not feasible in some situations where people have disabilities. I do know that they are trying to put provisions in place for that, so you may want to contact Companies House directly if you do have a client in that situation. The Minister for Trade gave a short speech yesterday as well, and indicated that fees will be reviewed as well. So just a heads up that potentially next year we'll be looking at an increase in fees again. Companies House have had to employ a lot more people to facilitate this, and also all the provisions that they're having to put in place. So I think we can safely say that there will be another increase next year. Previously, in previous presentations, we've been talking about the second stage of being an ACSP, and the fact that the second stage is the presenters legislation, and that was due to come in spring. Mark's been very diplomatic in his presentation, where he's not talked about dates, and he's now saying spring or summer. It was made clear that it is going to be postponed because there's still a lot of policy decisions to be made there. So the spring deadline for filing requirements and being an ACSP is being postponed. That isn't public knowledge yet, but just a heads up that will be coming, so you've got a bit more time to deal with that. Another piece of information that I think is really relevant is you may have clients that have gone through the verification procedure, and Companies House have said that there will be an indication on the public record when somebody has been verified. Because the IDV doesn't link to a person until you make a filing. So until you file a confirmation statement, or until the standalone PSC has made their filing requirement. So you may have people that have gone through IDV now, but it won't show up on the public record on that company until they file the confirmation statement. And that makes sense, because IDV isn't linked to Companies House and to a company until they've actually gone through that process of the filing. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. Another point is that IDV is a one-off process in most situations. So if you have a director or a PSC that is appointed to multiple companies, they only need to go through the process once, and they use the code for each of the companies they're appointed to. There have been questions asked about if somebody changes their name or their address, do they need to repeat the IDV process? The answer is no. They only need to complete it the once. So when you file a change of name, there will be no commitment to repeat the IDV process. If somebody was acting suspiciously, so if they're appointed to multiple companies and they started changing their names on all of their appointments to different names, then Companies House may take some action and ask some questions, and may ask them to repeat identity verification in those situations, but it's only going to be where there is suspicious behaviour in that situation. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now and just go through some slides that I have. Again, it's very difficult to show this in the slideshow. It just isn't compatible with the software we use for the webinars. So I'll just go through it in this format like Mark did. So just to give a bit of background and fill in some gaps. So identity verification is a new concept, definitely for Companies House. As you may know, we conduct AML You will do as well, and you'll be regulated, but people could form companies with Companies House without any ID checks, and this has led to a lot of fraud. So Companies House are now combating that by the introduction of identity verification, and this applies to any new companies, any new directors or PSCs that are appointed, but also the existing companies that are in place as well. And that's where I see the main burden. It's a different concept to the anti-money laundering regulations. So you may be conducting MLR for your clients, and as Mark said, you know, your KYC requirements. This is a new standard, and you have to make sure that IDV is conducted at the standard required by Companies House. Basically, it's to confirm that it's a real person, and their identity is usually checked through either using facial recognition through apps or validating documents if it's an in-person check. So it applies to all directors, PSCs, members of LLPs as well, and those who file on behalf of others as well will have to complete IDV. But as I said, it should be a one-off requirement. There'll only be specialist situations where somebody may be asked to complete IDV again. So to complete the process of IDV, you have two options. You can do it directly with Companies House. They use technology to be able to complete that and obtain your personal code or unique identifier. And it's a free service on Companies House, so you can access it at any point. It's not connected to any filings at all, so anyone can conduct IDV through Companies House. And then you connect it through a filing to a specific company once you've obtained your code. Option 2 is to use an ACSP, so an authorized corporate service provider. Gives a bit more flexibility about how you can approach IDV. So in certain cases, this may be the better option for you. ACSPs must also keep their records for 7 years as well, and can be inspected at any time to make sure that they're achieving the standards set by Companies House. So for IDV with Companies House, it's using technology that they call IDVT. You start the process on Companies House website, you then scan a QR code, you download an app, you go through the facial recognition part, upload your documents, and then that should be the process complete. It's also linked to the One Login code. It's where you create your account on Companies House. So once you've been issued your code and you've been successfully identity verified, you can log into your One Login account at any point and you'll be able to access your code in there. Some situations, because there's specific ID that can be required for this, some people may not have that. For example, a biometric passport. There's an option to use security questions as well, and that will be linked to a UK bank account. We had someone trial that for us. I must say that the security questions were quite difficult. Questions like how much is outstanding on your mortgage, and some people may not know that information. Once you've failed, you can't skip questions, you can't come back to it later. So if you failed, you can't use that option again. Some people may have problems using the technology. So another option is that you can go to the post office once you've started the process, and the post office will validate and upload your documents. So that's an option as well, but that would be for people in the UK. I know that there's a lot of issues with overseas people at the moment and being able to facilitate that. So you may need to use an ACSP in those circumstances. So who can be an ACSP? Mark did touch on this. To be an ACSP, you have to operate at the same standards as Companies House. And on some of my slides, I've put the links that Mark put on his slides as well, so that you can go and have a look at the guidance and make sure that you are meeting those standards. You have to be based in the UK, and you must be supervised and regulated as well under the anti-money laundering regulations, and you have to submit that as part of your application to become an ACSP. Mark did talk about that, and he did say that there's quite a high rejection rate because people putting in the wrong registration numbers or linking it to the wrong body. So be careful when you put in that application. Make sure you've got all the relevant information together. I think the process is quite detailed on Companies House, and they do tell you what you need before you start the process, so that can be quite helpful. Companies House will continue to check that the applicant is still registered and supervised as well. So if for any reason you lose your anti-money laundering status and you're no longer supervised, then you will no longer be able to act as an ACSP either. Okay, so IDV through an ACSP, there's two options here. So again, an ACSP can use technology, and that will be to check the cryptographic features of the document, and it'll be checking for fraud and tampering. Or option two is it can be checked by a person. That can be either remotely or in person. So the person conducting the IDV must be satisfied that the documents provided are sufficient as well. And here's where I've put the link into the standards for IDV. As a company, we've decided only to use technology, but there are some providers out there that are providing in-person IDV checks, and they are quite costly as well. But if you need us to tell you anybody that's providing those checks, then we're happy to pass you on to the relevant providers as well. So the standards for IDV, well, the information that we need to collect is full name, any former names as well, or any names that somebody might be known under. For example, I'll be on the register as Elizabeth, I'm known as Liz, but my ID is under Elizabeth, but some people might be registered under shortened names with Companies House. So it's about matching that, but as long as the date of birth is correct, then Companies House should be able to merge those details together. If the date of birth isn't correct on Companies House, then you will need to file forms to rectify that because it won't match under their system. So you need the date of birth, home address, the address history for the last 12 months as well, and an email address. Now the email address must be unique for each individual. You can't share an email address, and Companies House system will validate that as well. So if there's a company email address perhaps that's been used by multiple people, they'll all need to use a separate email address to go through this process. So the process of IDV where an ACSP is involved, first of all, you'll need to obtain the proof and make sure that you're happy that they're a real person, whether that's using IDVT or the in-person checks. And then the ACSP will access the web portal on Companies House, and you have to input the information on the person. So their name, date of birth, address, and what information you've used, what document you've used to verify their identity. So for an example, you may choose passport and you need to put the passport number in there as well. And then the ACSP must make a statement to say that they've verified at the standard that's required, and then you submit that to Companies House. Now for an ACSP, the way that the person receives the code is slightly different. So when you're doing it on Companies House, you have your one login, and that's where you access your code. Through an ACSP, your client doesn't need to create the one login account, and they will be emailed at the email address that they've provided. They will be emailed their code. Now, if you're then filing the confirmation statement for them, you're going to have to get that code off the person to be able to file a confirmation statement. And I see that this is an area where there may be a bit of pain, because your client will say, I didn't receive an email from Companies House, or no, I've not had anything, check your spam. And it's going to be a bit of chasing involved to make sure that you get that code back from your clients. I spoke to Companies House about a resend code button in the portal, something that I've been talking about for about a year, that would be necessary, because we know that people will say, I never received an email. That's still not in place. It's on their list of things to do, so I don't know when that's available. But if for any reason your client says that they've not received the code, then the process at the moment is to email inquiries at Companies House, and they will make sure that the code is resent. So that's just something to be aware of. So identity verification through technology. As I said, you can use the Companies House system, or you can use an ACSP that's using that technology as well. And I think that if you're doing it yourselves, you need to check out the standard, and the link is there. Or if you're using a third party, I think it's important that you make sure that they're achieving that standard as well, because we don't want to see problems down the line. I feel that this is necessary. It's really important. There's a lot of fraud. I think it's really important that Companies House have addressed this, but we need to make sure that people are operating at the right standard, because if they're not, then it means all that information on the register isn't going to be valid. And I think it's really important moving forward that we can be assured that everybody's gone through the correct process. And so Companies House have asked, if you become aware of somebody that's offering this service but they're not operating at the right standard, it does need to be reported to Companies House, and they're asking us to be gatekeepers as far as that's concerned. So accepted identification, if you're using technology, it is quite limited. It could be a biometric passport. For the UK, the Channel Islands, Isle of Man, or the EU, it could be a photo card driving licence. For the EU, Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, it can be a national identity card that has biometric information on it. And then there's three other options of a UK biometric residence permit, a UK biometric residence card, or a UK frontier worker permit as well. And these are the allowed documents for technology and using those facial recognition apps. There are some countries that don't have biometric passports. In those situations, you're really looking at an in-person check if you can't meet this criteria. So IDVT, the standards, you must check the cryptographic features of the documents, and that's the security features that are involved in those documents. It could be the holograms. There's certain parts and features that make sure that the document isn't forged or tampered with. Make sure that the document confirms the name of the person and also the date of birth of the person, because that's important information for submitting to Companies House. And also that the person physically matches the photo on that document. So there's a lot of liveness tests within these apps that are used. So somebody will need to take a selfie of themselves, and you need to make sure that that person matches the document. And within the apps, they look for likenesses between the two pictures. But we often see that perhaps that's failed because maybe the passport's a 10-year-old passport, so maybe that person's changed it in that time. So that's important information to check as well, and that they pass the liveness test, that they haven't used a previous photograph and they're actually using a live photograph of themselves as well. So if you're doing in-person checks, there's a lot more involved in this situation. More documents that need to be taken. There's a link there which will detail what the documents are that will be accepted. There's 2 groups of information, so you either need 2 documents from group A or 1 from A and 1 from B. It's really important as well, the standard does state that if the evidence is being checked by a person, then they must have been trained in detecting false documents by a specialist training provider. The Home Office offers best practice guide in that as well. So in-person checks, it's not getting a photocopy of somebody's ID that's maybe signed by a solicitor or an accountant. There's much more detail going into these checks, and you have to check, like the technology would check, that these documents are genuine and that they haven't been tampered with as well. But the link's there to the guidance, so you can go through that and see exactly what's involved if you decide to use those checks. For the implementation, if you have conducted IDV already for some of your clients, you need to keep that code safe for when it needs to be used. As Mark said, it's the 18th of November when it becomes compulsory. So any confirmation statements that are filed after that date, you will need to submit a code. So even if it's a late confirmation statement, if it's filed after that date, then you still need to submit the codes. So also for new companies and incorporations, for directors and PSCs, you'll need to conduct IDV before the incorporation can take place. Any appointments before that appointment can be filed, you'll need to have conducted IDV. But then for existing companies, for directors and PSCs, it's when the next confirmation statement is filed. Now, if it's a standalone PSC, so they're not appointed as a director, there are slightly different rules. It doesn't tie in with a confirmation statement. It will be in their month of birth. Now, when I first heard this, I thought that that sounded ridiculous, and it doesn't tie in with any other filing requirements that are made with Companies House for the company. So I did raise this question yesterday. Why is it in the month of birth for standalone PSCs? And the reason given is that because sometimes the PSC may not be as involved with the company and may not know if the confirmation statement filing day has been moved. They've given them a static date that can't be moved so that they know when their filing requirement is. To be honest, I still think that that is ridiculous and not much of an explanation. But unfortunately, these are the rules that we have to comply with. So it's one to watch out for, because it's definitely one that will be missed. So if you have any standalone PSCs, regardless of when the confirmation statement is due for that company, their filing requirement is in the month of birth, and you file within the first 14 days of that month. How do you file? I believe that there'll be an option on Companies House, and there'll be a form that can be filed through software as well. And for clients of ours on COSEC, we will be reporting this to you as well. So my last slide. When should IDV start? Well, if you've not started already, I would start now. Get a jump ahead. Get your clients IDVing. Don't wait until the confirmation statement is due, because there can be complications. So it's better that you have that code in advance. If they don't file when they're required to, they do commit an offence. That could be prosecution or penalties. Now, that will be an extreme case, but that is the situation that we're in. So a lot of people are asking me if there's going to be any penalties. Obviously, Companies House are going to encourage people to comply, first of all, but if they're not listened to, then they probably will issue penalties and in extreme cases go to prosecution as well later on. I have put on my slide about spring 2026, but as of yesterday, we know that that's not going to happen in spring 26. And as soon as we get any more information on that, we will let you know. So that takes me to the end of my slides. So I'm just going to stop sharing with you. I think we lost Mark. I think we were struggling a little bit with his connection. Oh, he's back. Did you just switch off your camera so we couldn't see you? Yeah, you've gone a bit quiet again, Mark, as well. Okay, we have got about 10 minutes left. We have got a lot of questions. Please, everybody know that I get a record of all the questions. So if we don't get round to your question now, I will make sure that your question is answered at a later stage. So we will email you with the answers to that as well. So let's start from the top. If the PSC date of birth is the last day of the month, can the IDV request be carried on to the following month? If it's in the date of birth, they have to file in the first 14 days of that month, so it wouldn't carry over to the next month. Mark's nodding, so yeah, I think we've got that one right. Okay, we're happy with that. Slight complication in November because it's not implemented till the 18th of November, so the November people would be done in 2026. Yeah, good. Right. Next question. What is the process with corporate PSCs as they won't have a date of birth? With any corporates, there's no requirement for them to complete IDV at the moment. That will be introduced at a later stage, so you don't need to worry about them. So that's good. Somebody said thank you very much. Have Companies House ever thought about doing a short video on their website for those to do IDV checks so that they'll have a brief look of what to do when identifying themselves? They think it'll be of benefit to some. I think that's one for you, Mark.
Yeah, so we aren't experts in terms of identity verification. All right, so we don't advise you guys on, you know, what sort of technology you need or how you go about identity verification. We simply publish the requirements, and then it's down to you guys then to work out whether or not you want to do the identity verification, because it is optional. And if you do want to do it, then you just need to assure yourselves either through your legal team and through, you know, lovely people like Liz, that you are meeting the requirements and standards, because there is a risk to your organization in you getting it wrong. So, you know, don't go into it, you know, sort of with your eyes shut. There is a real risk that if you get it substantially wrong, that we could end up suspending you as an ACSP or even ceasing you as an ACSP.
Yeah,
and that would impact your ability to file things in the future, because once you're no longer an ACSP, you would then have to sort of come back to us at a later stage and sort of, you know, go back through the rigmarole and prove to the registrar that the reasons that we suspended or ceased you for are no longer there, and to consider. So it is a real challenge. I don't think any ACSP really wants to be in the ceased and suspended pot. You know, there are genuine reasons why a company would be ceased. You know, it's closed or it's gone into insolvency, you know, normal business reasons. But any sort of reason that is linked to some sort of issue with a filing, fraudulent filings or issues with process, then the registrar would have to reconsider the application in its entirety and also consider fit and proper as well, because obviously he's already sort of stopped you submitting information once, and our system is set up to do that as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think that's one of the reasons why we decided not to go down the in-person route. We don't want to risk our status as ACSP. We always want to make sure that we do things properly. We know that our technology that we're using is at the same standard as yourselves, so we're happy with that bit. But yeah, I think it is a risk. I know that I've had some conversations with people as well that think that just doing the same as they've done for AML is enough, and it's not. So I think there's still some work to be done in that area, but I think it's just really important that whoever you're using or whoever you choose to use, you do check that they're working at the same standard. And if you're in doubt, then just use Companies House. And I know there can be some situations where that's not possible, but that would be my advice. Somebody's asked if they use us to form companies, do they just provide us with the relevant IDV code when placing the order? Yes, we do provide a service as well. So for those people that want us to conduct IDV, we can do that. But otherwise, we will need that code before we can submit the incorporation to Companies House there. Confirmation statements are coming up now. People may not have their code yet. What happens? You need to get the people IDV'd. Unfortunately, there's no easier answer to that. And that's why I said start on it now. Get a list of what confirmation statements are due in November and start getting those people through the IDV process if you've not started already. And then immediately look at December and kind of work on it that way. Because if you've not got the code, you won't be able to file it.
Yeah, I'd also add to that, Liz, that if you've got clients with multiple directors on a company, yeah, that all of the directors have to be IDV'd at the point of the confirmation statement. So if you've got 5 directors and only 4 are IDV'd, then you can't submit the CSO1.
Yeah, and it's the same for LLP members as well, isn't it?
Yeah. If I talk about limited companies, LLPs, overseas, anywhere you've got to provide IDV, all of the relevant people that need to be identity verified at the point of the confirmation statement have to be identity verified.
And I get a few questions about whether it's only designated members, but it's not. It's all the members.
Members, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody's asked is there a soft landing in the transitional year for non-compliance, i.e., no penalties? One for you, Mark, I think.
So we are currently looking at what the penalties are going to be. There's a colleague in the team looking at those. What I will say for you and your clients, right, is if the point of the confirmation statement passes and your client hasn't provided us with their identity verification documents, and yet they are still acting as a director, that is an offence. So it could be quite serious for the director or directors if they haven't IDV'd and they are still acting in the capacity of a director once that date passes. So as I say, we've given a 7 months, 6, 7, 8 months sort of voluntary period before the 18th of November to get people ID'd. So yeah, sort of get your clients ID'd, particularly those that are due November, December, and then think about January and February and March and sort of roll that process through just to make sure that your clients aren't caught out.
Okay. Somebody's out there've been quite a few questions actually, and I don't think either of us can really answer these questions, but I did want to mention it. People are asking about in-person checks, and as you've said, you're not experts in identity verification, and whether you can verify somebody over Teams calls. I think that that's a way to be able to check whether they match their documentation. I'm not sure, and you'd need to go through the training really to find out how, if it's a remote check, that you can validate the documentation and make sure that you check whether the document's been tampered with or whether there's any fraud on that document. I've not gone through that training either. I wouldn't know how to complete that remotely, but there are providers out there that do provide this training, and I'm sure that they would have answers to the questions. So I think you'd need to check with the people, the specialists in those areas, about how you complete that. And that's why we've decided to go through the technology route, as of Companies House as well, because it just removes that whole process and the technology does those checks for you.
Yeah, I went through the training many years ago, but with the actual tangible documents, and there are lots of markers that you can be trained in detecting whether something's been tampered or whether it's a fraudulent document or fraudulent passport, etc., etc. I haven't gone through the training to sort of do that remotely over sort of digital means, without using IDV technology. So as Liz said, I think personally there's an increased risk in doing that to you and your organisation. So again, make sure that if that is a route that you're going down, that you are fully aware of the risks, and make sure that you've got the relevant training to be able to detect that.
Yeah. I think this will be the last question that I'll take now. What about old people that potentially have no passport or driving license? It's something that we've been asked a lot. We know some people that are doing in-person checks where people don't have the photographic documentation available. It is quite costly, and as ridiculous as it sounds, I think that perhaps it may be easier for them to apply for a passport than it would be to do an in-person check. And there may be other situations where they would need that identification as well for banks and things like that. They're using these types of checks as well. So it would either have to be an in-person check where you can use other documentation, or my advice would be just get them to apply for a passport and then they can use that as well. I know that sometimes as well people have asked about old people and being able to use the technology. Some accountancy practices are actually having smartphones in their offices so that people can come in and they can guide them through that process, or there's the option of being able to go to the post office as well. And I know it can be difficult. We're also asked about where there's power of attorney. Can the person with power of attorney complete the IDV? No, it has to be the person that's actually appointed at Companies House. They need to go through the IDV process. So that's another common question that we get asked as well. I think that brings us to the end of today's session. As I said, we will get back to everybody. There's still a lot of questions that haven't been answered. So thank you very much, and we'll get back to you. Thank you very much to Mark as well. Really appreciate you coming on the call today. So thank you very much for sharing your time. And yeah, everybody have a good day. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.